If you ever frequent the r/custom Hearthstone subreddit, you may come across some posts tagged as humorous. These are either cheeky cards used to critique the current meta, or cards solely created for a pun. But every once in a while, I come across a humorous card and I think this could actually work in Hearthstone. So I present to you humorous cards that could actually work in Hearthstone, Part 3. Part 1 and 2 are in the description if you want to check them out. First up is Disguised Penguin, 0 mana 10/1 legendary that can't attack and appears as a Snow Flipper Penguin. This is a great card to start the video on. So when playing this, it's going to appear as a 1/1 on the board, and the card is meant to trick your opponent into attacking into it, either with their hero or a minion, and instead of taking the expected 1 damage, they are instead dealt 10. Seems pretty powerful, but there's actually a lot of ways your opponent can figure out if your 1/1 penguin is really a disguised 10/1. Spells like Shadow Word Death and Big Game Hunter would be able to target this 1/1 minion. In addition, Mossy Horror and other low attack minion cards wouldn't affect this minion. Plus, this has can't attack, which means if the player doesn't attack with it when they could, then that's probably another giveaway. Probably the easiest and least costing technique to check a penguin is to simply hover and attack over a penguin with one of your minions that has more than 1 health. If the 1/1 penguin shows it's going to kill your 7/7, then you know it's disguised. That's an easy solution to this 0 mana 10/1, but it's kind of an unfamiliar strategy to test cards. So I still think a lot of people are going to forget to test this before attacking into a penguin. Probably the biggest fear with this card would be playing it, then silencing it the next turn to deal 10 damage. I think this disguised or appearing as effect could present a unique sort of interaction between this kind of minion and enchantments, or buffs and debuffs. My idea is that this minion appears as a 1/1. Whenever you silence, buff, or debuff this, it's the 1/1 hologram. Let's just call it a hologram because that's cool sounding. It's the hologram that gains those enchantments. It's a silenced 1/1, a 5/5 penguin, whatever it is. But regardless of the enchantments, regardless of how it appears, the disguised penguin is always actually 10/1. So while the appearance of the minion can change, how the card actually interacts never does. Giving this taunt only changes the appearance. It doesn't actually change how the minion interacts, so your opponent will be able to attack around this card. This card would definitely be confusing to new players, but you also need to remember that it's still just a 1 health minion, which means a ping, a battle cry, a small minion, a cheap board clear, or a modest sneeze is going to kill this minion. It's cheap, easy to play around, and most likely you're not going to get the 10 damage value from the 0 cost card unless your opponent is naive or has a brain fart. And that's why I would love this card in the game. It wouldn't necessarily see much play, but it would make the normal Snow Flipper Penguin better, or at least make games more exciting when a penguin waddles out on the board. You could play this in a Zoo Echo Warlock, get a board of 10/1s, or just play regular Snow Flipper Penguins and bluff as though they are 10/1s. You can tell I like Disguised Penguin. What a great meme. Up next is Totally Not a Flame Strike, 3 mana Warlock spell that summons a 0/1, 0/2, and 0/3 Tiny Fin, and adds Defile to your hand. No, not the Tiny Fins! Besides the Murloc Massacre, which I think is a better name, this card is meant to set up a Defile that will let you clear at least a 4 health minion, much like Flame Strike. But Defile is no Flame Strike, and it deals damage to the entire board, has the opportunity to get spell damage multiple times, and comboed with this card can be done for only 5 mana. You probably know how crazy powerful Defile can be, and this card just helps enable a really powerful Defile turn. But I can't tell if this card is designed in a way that can boost the great gameplay that Defile brings, or reduce it to something kind of lame. There are those glorious times when you damage a minion here, spellstone a minion there, and then play Defile perfectly, clearing the entire board. Does this spell just reduce all of that hard work and problem solving, or does it allow for more type of those plays to happen on a big scale? Murloc Massacre, the new name I've given to the card, is pretty powerful, and it would probably see play. It's better than Flame Strike, especially for Control Warlock, who definitely does not deserve any more board clears. But you know what? I think Murlocs deserve their revenge with this card, so I think a way to balance this card, and to make sure that it's used only for giant Defile turns, is for the 0/3 Tiny Fin to have a Death Rattle that summons a 3/7 Murloc that gains +3 attack when damaged for your opponent. If you aren't able to get Defile to reach up to 8 casts, then you have a big angry Murloc to deal with. I think this is a pretty big nerf to the card, but I represent the Murlocs and I think my clients deserve the best. This change really gets to the core conflict I have with this card, and it gives a price to pay for playing this card and getting a Defile. Maybe you could improve this card a little bit, make the spell only 2 mana now, or make the minions all have 1 attack, but either way, this card should be a high risk, high reward to either clear the entire board, or get punished for your crimes by a big Murloc. Next up is Giant Cock. Oh, I was expecting 8 mana, 8/8. It probably should be a beast that costs 1 less for each egg that died this game. You know me, I love Giant Cock egg synergies, and this card would be a great addition. Early game eggs comboed with Carnivorous Cube can easily get this card down to 5 or 6 mana by those turns. It's not consistently going to be a great middle game tempo play, there just aren't enough eggs for that, but either if you wait long enough or if you get a lucky opening, you'll be able to play this card as a nice tempo swing. And if your board is already filled with Devil Sores, swinging Giant Cock out on the board is a nice way to finish. Unfortunately, I could not think of any jokes for this card. Up next is Lethal-o-Tron, 3 mana 3/4 mech that beeps violently when you have lethal, one way or another. So this card could be used in basically 2 ways, the helpful way and the annoying way. It could be helpful when you have the right cards to silence a taunt, buff some minions, and get lethal, whereas before you somehow wouldn't have seen it. But it could also be completely useless and really annoying if you have any sort of RNG in your hand that could result in somehow getting lethal. Yogg, Primordial Glyph, you could have Shadow Visions into Free to Amber and to charge Devilsaur. Apparently this card would be nearly impossible to code, and maybe for the best, but I think it's a fun card nonetheless. It lets you know when you have lethal, but it takes into consideration all of the RNG in Hearthstone and makes the actual feature of this card probably more annoying than a useful tool. My one change to this card would be that it also beeps on your opponent's turn if they have lethal. I think this would actually buff the card by annoying your opponent just as much as it annoys you. And speaking of RNG, we have No Such Thing, 3 mana rogue spell that removes all cards with the word random from each player's hand and deck. So I did the math, meaning I typed random into the search bar and found about 85 cards with the word random in them. Comparing this to Sulking Geist, there are about 60 of those 1 mana spells in the game. Of course, it's less about quantity and more about quality, because you really only will get the value from this card if your opponent is playing any of these random cards. And it's actually interesting to see how many random cards are used from class to class. A class like Druid has very little and none of them they really use, while Hunter plays a lot of random effects, and varying from deck to deck, there's a lot more important RNG involved. So the spell's probably going to get some value against most opponents. Yes, it doesn't get rid of all the random effects like Discover, but it does allow you to pretty consistently remove value from your opponent's deck. And yes, if you run 2 copies, it will remove the other copy from your own deck. In addition, No Such Thing helps you see what sort of deck your opponent might be playing based off the random cards of theirs that get destroyed. Controversial view, but I think in terms of randomness, we're in a fairly decent meta without a lot of random cards determining the entire game. But just in case you want to make sure the playing field is level, No Such Thing could be a fun tech card to make your opponent think instead of relying on their luck, which seems to be the only reason that my opponent can beat me. And last up, Baku and Gen were dropped off at the Pokemon Daycare, and an egg was found named Geku the Moonmane, 7 mana 7/7 with the battlecry. If your deck has no cards, upgrade your original hero power, and it costs 1. This card may seem like a meme, but it's actually a pretty cool battlecry. It's basically a dead card in your hand throughout the entire game until you've drawn your entire deck. But if you can deal with the drawback, the battlecry effect gives you a big boost in value and tempo to hopefully kill your opponent before fatigue becomes an issue. Dead Man's Hand Warrior comes to mind, allowing you to play Geku Moonmane quickly, then shuffle your hand back into your deck. I could also see a Hunter, maybe even a Hunter Hemet deck, that could establish a board with a strong early game, play Hemet, and then use Geku Moonmane to finish off their opponent. So there are some ways that I think this card could legitimately work. Why not just throw it in a control Baku deck? But most of all, I like this card's design for the interesting battlecry requirement. Upgrading and lowering the cost of the hero power is only so good, but I think if other rewards were given for this battlecry requirement, it could create some more interesting decks that focus on drawing their deck quickly. But it would be important that this type of card was balanced. You have to make sure that when a deck is built around this powerful battlecry, there needs to be some sort of interaction between the 2 players, so that just drawing through your entire deck isn't the win condition. I want a card that encourages fast drawing, starts the race against fatigue, and still leaves a way for your opponent to try and counter the game plan besides just killing them quickly. Perhaps in an upcoming video, I'll showcase some of the cards I've actually been designing, like the one that's taken inspiration from this battlecry. Geku Moonmane may have started as a meme, but it could definitely fit in the game and honestly could see play in the right deck this meta. But I have to say, the best thing about this card is that it might be the one card you don't mind drawing last. Well, that's all for this episode. Again, you can check out episodes 1 and 2 here at this end screen. I also do another series on the week's best cards from the r/custom Hearthstone subreddit, and I stream for a little bit nearly every day on Twitch. As for this video, thank you all for watching, and until next time, ta-ta.
That's nice.